Hello again. It's finally the month of horror. Hope you enjoyed the pre-October reviews. Now it's time for the actual October reviews. And for the first horror review of October, we move from the 1950s into the 1960s. The same year that George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead came out, another classic horror film came. A movie that is very highly well revered and considered an absolute classic of the horror genre. The movie today is Rosemary's Baby from 1968. And just in case anybody's wondering, I am not going to compare it at all to the 2014 TV miniseries remake because I'd never seen it. In fact, I'd never heard of the TV miniseries until after I saw this movie. So it's all fresh here. Now, where do I start with this movie? Well, first, I've known about Rosemary's Baby for many years. It was in some of my best movies ever made books that I have, and despite its acclaim and how high it's held in the horror genre, and despite how much I love older movies, I didn't actually get around to seeing it until last year. I just got caught up in all the other movies throughout my life, and better late than never. I didn't know a ton about Rosemary's Baby until I saw it last year. When I was very young, I think I read a review for it in one of my books, but I don't remember what it said, and the only thing that I really remembered about the movie from that book was the picture they used, which is Mia Farrow as Rosemary, staring into her baby's crib with a face like this, kind of like the Home Alone face. And that was mostly what I knew about the movie. The picture almost had a comedic feel to it. So I didn't think it was a comedy, but I thought the picture was kind of funny. For the most of my life, I just thought it was a movie about a woman that gives birth to a grotesque baby. And then, before I saw it, I read up on it and found out the real plot, and even then I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. But I finally saw it, and holy shit, this movie is incredible. And I would say, I love horror movies to death. It's my favorite genre, as I've said many times. And while Rosemary's Baby is not one of my top 10 favorite movies, which includes movies from all types of genres, in the horror genre, when I really think about it, I think Rosemary's Baby has to be one of the greatest horror films ever made. It's just extremely well put together, writing and directing, and the actors in this movie. Like, I really believe that everybody in this film gives a just top-notch performance, and even the ones that are not Oscar-worthy, they still do a great job. This movie is 2 hours and 11 minutes long, I believe, or 2 hours and 16. Anyway, it's over 2 hours long. It's a very long movie, and despite that, this film just goes by. It's very well paced, and it feels like a great journey while watching it from beginning to end, because you really get sucked in and you want to know where it's going and what's going to happen. And I did not find it boring in the least. It was interesting all the way through, and I know there's a lot of people that do not like really long movies. I've had some friends that are easily bored by a film unless it's like 90 minutes. And I know a lot of people think a movie shouldn't go on that long unless it's really special, like a drama, but it all depends on how it's made. And like I said, I really like long movies. I like short movies too, but I don't like them to be too short or too long. In this film, while it is long, it justifies its length. Before I get into the story, I should obviously address, for some people, what is a little bit of the elephant in the room, which is that the film was written and directed by Roman Polanski. A very controversial, yet very well-respected filmmaker. He's controversial for his personal life, which is pretty disturbing, and I will get into exactly what is controversial about Roman Polanski at a later time when I'm talking about certain themes of the movie. To say it right now, I think would be a bit much. But I will say that when it comes to filmmakers who are very talented in their work, but are either horrible people or have done horrible things, I'm very good at being able to separate what someone is or has done as a person from their work. And it's how I'm able to enjoy a lot of movies made by sketchy people, like say Victor Salva. And obviously it adds a bit of a eeriness or awkward feeling while watching certain parts, but in some way that kind of adds to the experience if it's a horror film, that extra level of creepiness or uneasiness. Just my thought. Rosemary's Baby was based on a book by Ira Levin, who is also the author of novels such as The Stepford Wives and The Boys from Brazil, which were all adapted into films in the 1970s, and that Nicole Kidman remake. And the film was, strangely enough, produced by William Castle, who for a lot of people who are not into cult films, William Castle was a B-movie schlock filmmaker, pretty well received by a lot of fans of the genre, and his work was often very successful. He made The Tingler with Vincent Price, the original 13 Ghosts and House on a Haunted Hill from the late 50s and early 60s. And he was a very gimmicky guy. I read and I've heard from sources such as James Rolfe when he does his Cinemassacre show that William Castle would have like theaters that played his movies have people at the theater dress up maybe as monsters, or they'd have certain things like, it's like a 3D show almost, where you have special effects going on while the movie plays. Because like William Castle thought it would make the audience feel like they were part of the movie almost. And William Castle, he produced Rosemary's Baby. I think this could be, maybe there were a few more. I haven't done a ton of research into William Castle's filmography yet, but I think Rosemary's Baby could be his most mainstream film, and Castle originally wanted to direct it himself to finally make a more serious movie. And Paramount, the studio that produced the movie, they were all for adapting this film, but their condition was Castle had to get someone else to direct it because they were worried his reputation as a B-movie director would hurt the film. And, well, it's a little sad for William Castle. I think it worked out the best when they brought in Roman Polanski to write and direct it. Other credits obviously have to go to the music. The music in Rosemary's Baby is limited, but extremely effective, and the music is actually pretty scary in its own. Done by Krzysztof, Krzysztof Komeda. Credited as Christopher Komeda because gotta Americanize everything. The opening theme to Rosemary's Baby is the right levels of creepy while also having a very soft feel to it. In fact, the opening theme is actually sung by the film star Mia Farrow herself. And the cinematography was done by William A. Fraker, who is an Oscar-nominated cinematographer 6 times. And the film's editing was done by Sam Osteen and Bob Wyman. The cinematography in this film is flawless and worthy almost of being compared to the cinematography of Brian De Palma's films and Quentin Tarantino's films. And the editing is a very tricky thing. It's a key element to a lot of films that I feel doesn't get as much credit as it deserves. Music, cinematography, and editing, the true things that make a movie effective, especially a horror film. I mean, everything comes together, but those elements are pretty key. Rosemary's Baby stars Mia Farrow, post the Frank Sinatra days and pre-Woody Allen days, also pre-Arthur and the Invisibles, as Rosemary Woodhouse, and John Cassavetes, father of Nick Cassavetes, who was an actor and the director of The Notebook, as Guy Woodhouse. They're a young married couple and they're moving into a new apartment, a pretty big ass apartment, and it's actually the building they used, I believe, is called the Dakota, which is considered a eerie building for a lot of people. One, it was where Rosemary's Baby was filmed, and also it's the building where John Lennon got killed. Anyway, Rosemary and Guy are young and they're hoping to someday have a baby. And Guy is a struggling actor doing like small plays and TV commercials, which he wishes he could do better. Although I think commercials, while they are used to advertise shit, they can be a fun place to work in. And after moving into this apartment building, they notice a bunch of interesting things going around. Like they hear noises, and one day after one of the neighbors commits suicide, they're invited by an old couple who this particular person was living with. And these people are Minnie Cassavet and Roman Cassavet, played by Ruth Gordon and Sidney Blackmer. These two are fucking fantastic. Mia Farrow is the star and she gives an amazing performance. She puts so much into her role, just so much effort, and help create such a interesting but extremely a frustrating character. But Ruth Gordon and Sidney Blackmer, they play what could possibly be one of the top 10 scariest villains of all time. I don't do top 10 videos, but if I did, and if I did one for like the top 10 scariest villains, I think Ruth Gordon and Sidney Blackmer, their characters from Rosemary's Baby, would be on that list. And if I did put them in the list, I would put them together under the same number, because these characters, they work as one, and you can't include one without the other in this case. Anyway, the Cassavets are an old couple. They're supposed to be in their 70s, and Ruth Gordon, who was 70, or 71 at the time. It's hard to tell, but the year after this movie, Ruth Gordon won Best Supporting Actress for her performance in Rosemary's Baby, and man, she fucking earned it. And while people might know her better as Maude from the 1971 romantic comedy drama Harold and Maude. The Cassavetes are, on the surface, kind of a nosy and talkative old couple, but they seem to have a good heart. Like, they're an old couple who young people would probably find slightly annoying, but they'd also see that they mean well. And when they see them, they would put on a nice face, but they'd also at times enjoy their company.
Oh, that's nice. Look how you put the table now. Isn't that interesting?
I saw it in a magazine.
Oh, my nice picture.
And this old couple ends up becoming part of Guy and Rosemary's lives. They meet up with them when they first move in, and Rosemary, she tries to be nice. She's very good at putting on a nice face, hiding how she really feels. And after the first time they have dinner with them, Guy seems to have a complete change of attitude about the Cassavetes as well as the plans for the future that he and Rosemary have been talking about. And a bunch of weird stuff starts happening throughout the film. Eventually, Guy gets the lead role in a play that he was sure would jumpstart his career. And then he suggests that Rosemary and him have a baby, while acting very edgy, very questionable. But Rosemary, who, let's be honest, is a bit of a fucking idiot, doesn't make much of it and just goes with it. And I don't know how much of a spoiler this is, because it's really hard to talk about the storyline to Rosemary's Baby without spoiling all the major shocks in the film. So I'm going to say this much. The night that they plan to conceive, Minnie comes by with some desserts as like a good luck treat. And Rosemary eats only a few spoons before getting turned off from the dish. But she notices in the few that she had that there's a weird taste to it. And up to this point, the movie's had a bit of a, I guess I would say a cautious feel where you pretty much know something bad's gonna happen. But so far, everything has been okay, aside from the previous person committing suicide. But even then, it was just seen as that, a suicide. They didn't think much of it. And Rosemary, after eating the weird tasting dessert, collapses, letting us, the audience, know that the dessert was drugged. What follows is pretty much the only time in the whole film that we get any sort of special effects sequence. The movie, for the most part, is completely special effects free, except for this sort of trippy dream sequence in the middle of the film. And even then, it fits there because it's a dream. Dreams are supposed to be weird and unreal. And during this really fucked up, trippy sequence, Rosemary imagines she's on a boat, then she's in the Sistine Chapel, I think, and then winds up in an underground lair where she is stripped naked and tied to a bed. And the apartment tenants, including her husband and the Cassavetes, show up, and they gather around her, completely naked. And then all of a sudden, a creepy man appears and slowly turns into a monster, and then mounts the bed and rapes Rosemary. And all the while she's laying there, pretty much immobilized from the drugs and due to being tied down. And the next morning, she doesn't remember really much of it. She thinks it was just a nightmare. And Guy says that while she was asleep, he had sex with her. And this is a part that could be a turnoff for a lot of modern audiences. Like, yes, rape scenes are very disturbing, but the way the characters in this film react to the rape could be seen as very, I guess, frustrating or sexist, and that's an interesting theme of this movie that some people debate. Is Rosemary's Baby, the movie, sexist or misogynistic? And my personal thoughts, it could go either way. I personally don't think the film was set out as being sexist or misogynistic. I think it was just trying to be a horror movie. And there are some people who also see the film as an attack against the sexist attitudes of the times, of the 1960s, and the way women were taught to think and just accept certain things. Like, I'm not an expert on the sexism of the decades past, but I know that when it comes to like rape and date rape, in certain cases, people didn't generally see it as a serious issue as it is today in pretty much all cases. And the character of Rosemary, well, she is extremely weak and pathetic in this film, letting her husband and the Cassavetes tell her what to do and never questioning it. As I said, there are a lot of women that were like that in that time, and I've talked to women who grew up in that era, and they say that is how a lot of women were expected to be and how they were, in the eyes of many, supposed to be, not to question or fight anything that they were told to do. Maybe I'm making too broad a statement, but I've been told that this depiction of Rosemary is pretty accurate to the times. Although the argument of is or isn't Rosemary's Baby misogynistic in any way, that's even harder to figure out considering the movie's director is Roman Polanski. And I said earlier I'd bring up in more detail Roman Polanski's controversy. Well, here it is. Roman Polanski, for those who don't know, in 1976, Roman Polanski drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl, and he managed to flee the US, and for the past 40 years he has been living primarily in France, where he can't be extradited. What he did was horrible, and he is still considered a fugitive. However, a lot of people in the film industry and film lovers still hold his talent, the movies he's made, in high regard. And as I said, it's a case of separating the film from the person. And what to think. It was so long ago, and I like the movie. As I said, I can enjoy Jeepers Creepers and more films from Victor Salva, knowing that he's a convicted child molester. But it's a touchy subject for some people. I just can separate what happened from the movies. I know a lot of people can't, but it's all up to personal opinion. But it is interesting and pretty eerie. Roman Polanski drugged and raped somebody, and this movie, its key moment is when the main character is drugged and raped. Very dark subject, and the film is not for everybody, but this sequence was very well done and very trippy. And shortly after Rosemary becomes pregnant, she begins feeling extreme pains in her body. And she's told to go to a doctor named Dr. Saperstein to help her through her pregnancy. And this doctor is another very shady person, like someone who, to a normal person, would raise a lot of red flags, or at least would be questions like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And he's played by Ralph Bellamy. And this was the first movie I'd seen with Ralph Bellamy other than Trading Places and Coming to America, and it was pretty cool to see him in such a villainous role. And he plays it well, playing an aggressive asshole doctor who we find out is in league with the Cassavetes. And throughout Rosemary's pregnancy, she keeps experiencing these pains, and they just keep pretty much telling her to bear it. And at one point, an old friend and Rosemary and Guy's former landlord shows up, and while there, he meets Roman Cassavet, and through a weird look that Roman gives him, Hutch calls Rosemary later saying he's found out something interesting about her neighbors. And when she goes to meet him, he never shows up. And then she finds out later that he's in a coma. And the months continue to pass, and after having a party with some old friends who tell Rosemary that the advice this doctor is giving her is horrible, she almost considers going to a new doctor. And a running thing with the Rosemary character is she is consistently pretty pathetic and weak in this film, but she has moments where it seems like she is gonna be smarter, like she's gaining smarts, and she might actually fight back against the pretty much abuse she's being put through in this pregnancy. But then she falls back into just doing what everybody says. It's extremely frustrating, and you just want to scream at her for how gullible and stupid she is, but Mia Farrow's acting here is fucking fantastic, and she does create an extremely interesting and very easy to watch character who you do, despite her ineptness, you do care about her and you hope for the best for her. And after several months, and with not too long to go before she gives birth, she finds out that her friend Hutch has died, and before he died, he left her a book called All of Them Witches, about old witches from the early 1900s. And while reading the book and taking one last message that Hutch left for her, which was, "It's an anagram," his dying words pretty much, She examines the book and tries to find if there's an anagram in the title. And then going to a page that he had marked on a particular witch, and seeing that this particular witch had a son whose name is underlined, she, using Scrabble words, letters, arranges the name of this son of this witch, and rearranging it, she finds that it can spell Roman Cassavet. Dun dun. And Rosemary figures out that her neighbors are a coven, and she believes that they're planning to steal her baby and use it for a sacrifice. The first person she, of course, goes to is her fucking husband, who, since how much of an ass kisser and just how much he sucks up and just praises the Cassavets, once again, it's frustrating because pretty much everybody in the audience, I think, is smarter than Rosemary. And throughout the film, she's been wearing this necklace, which contains what they say is a thing called tannis root. A weird odor-smelling thing. And reading the book, she finds that tannis root is apparently the devil's moss, as it's called. And when she finally decides to leave her husband, figuring out, no shit, that he's a member of the Cassavet's coven, she tries to go to Dr. Saperstein, and while there, the secretary there notices the lack of tannis root odor, and then points out that Ralph Bellamy has the same scent on him, and she figures out that the doctor is a member as well. So she then tries heading to her original doctor, who she left about 9 months ago. And this doctor, named Dr. Hill, is played by, in his first major role, Charles Grodin. Yeah, this was his very first big role. And Charles Grodin, he doesn't have much to do here, but his character is memorable for the fact that Rosemary goes to him. And Rosemary, this is a scene where it's become a cliche that I fucking hate in horror movies, where a character who has experienced something supernatural or something unbelievable goes to somebody or screams about what's happening to somebody and does so without any evidence to back them up whatsoever. And then they act almost frustrated or they act judgmental when the other person doesn't believe them. And my thoughts when I see this kind of scene is, can you fucking hear yourself? Just, yeah, people don't, yes, what they're saying is true and people aren't believing them, but what did you think was gonna fucking happen? If you don't have any proof, then people aren't gonna take anything you say even with a grain of salt. And Dr. Hill, he listens, and to its credit, the scene isn't that insufferable. And she, being the trusting dumbass she is, believes that he believes her. And she stays there to rest. And then all of a sudden, Hill comes in, and with him are Guy and Dr. Saperstein. And Rosemary is brought back to the apartment, and she tries to fight, tries to keep them away from her and her baby, but they get to her, and she ends up going into labor, giving birth. And a few days later, they tell her the baby died being born, and she doesn't believe them. But she is completely helpless at this point, and that's another great theme of Rosemary's Baby, and it's apparently a trademark of Era 11, the theme of conspiracy or paranoia. And I think this is what is truly scary about Rosemary's Baby. The fact that when she tries to get away, there's nowhere to go and they find her. Just the idea that no matter where you go, they will find you. You can't get away. And one day, while everybody in the apartment is gone, she sneaks out and finds a secret door that connects to the Cassavetes' apartment, and wielding a long, sharp knife, she barges in to what appears to be a little party, and in the corner she sees a baby's crib draped in black curtains, holding this knife, and being the strongest I think we'll ever see her, she holds everybody back and goes over to the crib, and she looks inside, and she is horrified by what she sees, and this is an interesting thing. We never see what the baby looks like. All we do is see the crib, and we hear a few baby noises, and it's left up to our imagination what it looks like. But anyway, Rosemary looks at the coven, and this is where the twist is revealed, and I think most movie audiences are smart enough to have figured it out on their own. But even still knowing what the twist is before Rosemary figures it out, it's still a little shocking because it's just executed so well. And the twist? Rosemary screams, "What have you done to it? What have you done to its eyes?" And Roman Cassavetes says, "He has his father's eyes." And Rosemary, once again, in a frustrating but extremely emotional and sympathetic way, yells, "Guy's eyes are normal!" And then, this is it, Roman yells, "Satan is his father. He came up from hell." Revealing that that monster we saw during the trippy dream rape sequence was the devil, and the baby is the Antichrist. And Rosemary, who was established earlier in the film, was a not practicing Catholic, like born Catholic, but moved on, but still contains a little religious views inside her. She is just horrified and screams, "It can't be!" And the coven, all these middle-aged and old people, just are smiling and going, "It is true," and then they all start chanting, "Hail Satan!" And Rosemary breaks down, screaming, "God," and they go, "God is dead! Satan lives!" And this is the only time we ever see the Roman character acting anyway villainous. As I said, the Cassavetes are some of the scariest and most well-done horror villains I've ever seen, because they act like a sweet old couple throughout this film, and even after the big twist is revealed, like with the exception of Roman's hailing Satan, they still don't act villainous. The mini character especially, they just continue to act like optimistic, nice people. And Rosemary, in the end, she completely gives up trying to fight them, knowing there's nothing she can do. And for the audience who have been with her throughout this journey, it's heartbreaking to watch, because even though she wasn't really that strong, she was, at first, seeming like she was getting stronger, and to see it all fail, like, the ending to Rosemary's Baby is extremely bleak and depressing. And in some cases where you would hope there would be some closure of some kind, this could really annoy some people. But here, this ending, Rosemary, she's told she doesn't have to join, but they ask her if she would be a mother to the kid. And looking at the baby, even though he's supposedly grotesque, it's her kid and she's the mom, and it's that parental thing where even if the kid's ass shit ugly, the parent usually will love it. And she rocks the crib, smiling at her baby. And the way this scene is shot, it almost fools you into thinking it's touching. But, I mean, my thought, it's not. This just is really messed up. And then we get a panning shot with the film's theme played once again. And that's where it ends. Now, on the one level, I think this ending is a great horror ending, because any hope you had for Rosemary getting out, any hope you had for some kind of resolution, it's all gone up in smoke. This is one movie where you can truly say the bad guys won, and seems like all is lost and this baby is the Antichrist, so you know where that's going. It just ends right there, and I think this is a great horror ending, because what's supposed to happen in a horror movie? Horrible things, and in the last 10 minutes, a lot of horrible things happen. And it's so well made that I feel it just fits. However, I also, even though I love it as a horror ending, there's also a part of me that was slightly disappointed. And let me explain why. When this happened, and it just ended right there with her looking at the baby in a loving way, I just thought, that's it? What happened next? Yeah, as much as I think this ending fits, I really want to know what happened next. Like, is Rosemary completely done? Is she just gonna be this kid's mother while he's raised to destroy the world? Is she gonna try to intervene? Is she possibly going to kill the kid? Because we thought she was for a moment, but then that whole mother love thing kicked in. Yeah, it just ends right there, and I'm just thinking, what happened next? I want to know! You know how a story often has a 3-act structure to it? Rosemary's Baby, it feels like, even though a lot happens in this film, it doesn't feel like a 3-act story to me. The whole movie feels like a very long first act to a much bigger story, and it just decided to end there. And I know that there were technically sequels to this movie, both in film and book form, but people don't really count those. There was a cheap, made solely to get attention TV movie in the 1970s called Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby. I've seen the sequel, the TV sequel, and I'll say this. There's a scene where the grown-up son of Rosemary becomes possessed after the coven fails to initiate a possession through chanting Hail Satan, and the son becomes possessed by Not unholy chanting, but by rock and roll music. I'm fucking serious. So yeah, if you wanna check out this movie that's title feels like a spoof title because it's a reference to the other classic film, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, then you can check it out on YouTube, but I wouldn't recommend it personally. And there's a book sequel called Son of Rosemary, which, I'll be honest, I have not read. But I've read the synopsis, and it really disappointed a lot of fans of the first story. That's how the film ends, and it's horrifying. It's one of the best horror movie endings, and also one of the most frustrating I've ever seen. One hand, I like it. On the other, I feel like I've been teased. So that's pretty much my review of Rosemary's Baby. I think it's very frustrating, but extremely engaging. And the frustration is a key part to the experience, and you care despite the flaws of what happens to the Rosemary character. And because I feel like I need to mention this, John Cassavetes as Guy Woodhouse, on the one hand he's very good playing such a despicable, backstabbing cocksucker of a husband. On the other, he's kind of downplayed a little, and I can't explain it. At times he really nails the sleazy piece of shit persona. On the other, he feels a little wooden. A good comparison would be the boyfriend character in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. But yeah, Mia Farrow, John Cassavetes, Ruth Gordon, Sidney Blackmer, they fucking brought this movie to fucking life. And Maurice Evans, best known as Dr. Zayas from Planet of the Apes, the original. He was a fun touch as Hutch. Ralph Bellamy was fun, and Charles Grodin, it was cool to see him. This may seem a little shoehorned, but I just want to mention these quick cameos. Victoria Vetri appears as the original possible mother choice that the Cassavetes picked out, who ended up committing suicide, Terry. She was a popular actress or model at the time, and there's even a funny joke where Rosemary mistakes her for Victoria Vetri. And there's a scene where Rosemary talks to the original actor who got the role that made Guy famous, but Guy took over because the actor became blind. And Rosemary finds out later that the blindness was part of Guy's deal with the Coven, and they blinded the actor. And while talking to this guy, like, it's just a voice role, but in order to get a genuine surprise reaction out of Mia Farrow, Roman Polanski cast as the voice of the actor Donald Baumgart, who you hear over the phone, Tony Curtis. Yeah. And while he didn't get to direct it, he did still produce it, and he had a pretty memorable cameo as the guy outside the foam booth in the phone call at Dr. Hill scene, William Castle. And that's it. I wish I could have said more, but unless it's a movie I really, really love and care about, or a director I highly respect, I like to keep these reviews to an hour at least. Have a great October, and I'll see you next week.